only a slave quantifies its value through its productivity. This quote's pretty interesting, where as someone who's been working for, say, a paycheck for more than a decade, right? My view on this is that this is basically the definition of capitalism. Capitalism is basically saying, hey, if you don't produce, you're not useful, you're useless. And my view on this is, if you're someone who's working just for a paycheck or a wage, salary, right, some type of fixed, if I do these tasks, I get paid this amount. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're the person who says, hey, look at how big down there is for me because of how much I'm making, if that's your only metric of saying, hey, I'm successful, or I'm worth this because I made this much this year, like, that's fine, but what is the bigger picture? Because if you're just comparing the numbers, right, that are given to you through a system, right, essentially what is that? You could say it's a job market, you can say it's the employment market, but in the end, it's pretty much you agreeing, hey, I'm gonna work and do these things for a certain wage. And if that gives you the most value ever, then you may be a slave to, quote unquote, the system. And if you're a slave to the system, what happens is you are basically saying, hey, look at my forehead. My value is written here, and this is how many digits I made in the last year, the last quarter, the last month. Oh my gosh, I had this crazy night that I made this much, or one day I made this many, hundreds of dollars or thousands or whatever that metric is, right? But in the end of the day, if you quantify yourself with just a number, then that's exactly what you are. Versus, on the other hand, if you look at somebody who says, hey, the reason why I do what I do, right, is to provide value to this many other individuals, this community of people that's maybe underrepresented, maybe my own community, which I didn't have something when I was growing up. So the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, apart from just a number, is maybe, hey, there's a bigger picture to this. And the truth is, if you can't see that based off of what I just said, then you may still be trapped in that slave system. I am an average guy. I went through the same thing, and I went through a lot of the iterations of realizing, oh my gosh, am I really a slave? There's no way I could be. Me? There's no way, no chance in this world. But when you actually look backwards, right, look internally, look at, hey, what in the world is actually going on? You realize, well, I jibbed myself. I definitely thought one thing, but it's not such. I'll give us a good example. I basically moved from one job to another for the quote-unquote guarantee, right, of a salary increase of $5,000 per year. Now, when I did this, I thought, for your understanding, right, that $5,000 was huge, right? Doesn't matter if it was per month or per year, it felt like a jackpot, because the fact is, $5,000 post-tax, roughly, right, if you take away 30% for, insurance, benefits, and just tax rate, blended, you're looking at, okay, well, I could still get, let's say, $3,500 extra in my hand per year, which roughly is basically $300 a month. And $300 a month at 2 paychecks a month, that's an extra $150. The way I looked at it, especially because I was a lot less just experienced, whether it's handling money, right, living life, seeing more of what the world has to offer, I basically was like, okay, well, this is amazing, because my personal life would be at that time like, hey, $600, I get everything I want in, whether that's going out on the weekend, and I'm pretty frugal day to day, so it's like, even if I'm spending more at certain time frames throughout the month, I was like, if I'm spending at 600 and you're telling me I can jack up that budget to 900, basically an increase in salary doesn't mean you want to spend it all. But in this case, I was like, this makes perfect sense. And as I started working on a new job and any other job afterwards, right, it was always this feeling of like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, because the money, the paycheck, it becomes constant, right? There's basically a new baseline of dopamine, if you want to call it like that. And when I'm not getting, this kind of new money, such, in a grandiose way, like after the first paycheck, second paycheck, you're like, okay, this is great, but now what, right? What happens next? And that's the answer, which only you will know how you feel when that moment happens. And what I felt personally was like, okay, so there's people that now, forget about the 5K, right? They're earning, let's say, double, right? The whole salary, they're earning double. And I see what they're doing and I'm like, well, I can do this too. And I can do, their manager's job eventually too, and even above. And I was like, so if everyone can do everything, why am I stuck here at this point making this much, right? And so it became kind of this, the hierarchy of, say, corporate structure in this case is, okay, there's, in this case it was consulting. So you have, an associate level, like you're just, getting in per se. And honestly, there could be an analyst level even before, but keep it simple. You have your entry level, then you have a senior associate or senior consultant, then you have a manager level, senior manager, and then those guys are managed, let's say, by a director, and you have a managing director / partner, and then those people basically own the firm or own basically the deal flow, and there's resource allocation by everyone else below in the pyramid structure that I just described. So all of that to say, the truth that I realized is that in that fishbowl / system, the people, whether it's title, which is their version of them saying, hey, I'm earning basically this much, right? That's the assumption with that title, because you're able to get a minimum amount of money, whether that's per year, or maybe there's, hey, salary plus bonuses or something like this, right? So all of that to say, it basically was me realizing, hey, what game am I playing? And I realized, okay, so the maximum I could earn in a year, like, yeah, if your partner, maybe it is 1 or 2 million a year or even more. But by the time you get there, traditionally speaking, you're talking around like 25 years of work, 30 years of work. And in the last maybe 10 years, 15 years, depending on the trajectory, some luck, who all those things, you're looking at that, final stance. And I told myself, I was like, so if I'm waiting that many years, right, if I'm slaving it out, right, to be this slave, and in corporate jobs, I just call it a fancy slave, honestly, in my own words. What I realized was like, okay, if the max is this much and it takes me this long, what can I do in those years before then, right? Can I do it on my own? Can I do it on my own terms? Can I figure out that, hey, this whole system of a thing, right? You don't need to just be the paycheck guy. You can be an entrepreneur. And I'm more entrepreneurial from, a young age. I've always considered myself like a businessman, CEO type of person. So really, this quote, my honest thoughts on it is, you could be in this spot right now, and that's okay. But it's a choice, right? It's a choice of, they say, hey, a paycheck, a salary, it gives you comfort. It gives you that feeling of like, okay, I'm getting this every 2 weeks or every week or every month or whatever, right? And in that comfort, your baseline version of what you need to do to get more resources, you may become comfortable, because as they say, there's two things. A job is J-O-B, just over broke, but you only realize that once you start working it, because then you realize if you want any of the fancy things or anything that, in all of social media, it's still heightened, Lamborghinis, Louis Vuitton, Coach bags, all these things. There's nothing wrong with buying it, nothing wrong with having them, right? But it comes down to, who are you, right? Who are you, where if you have more than enough resources, you do what you want with your money. If you have nothing, you still do whatever you want with your money or debt or whatever. But a slave quantifies their value through this thing called productivity, because there is no other label to a resource. It's called human capital in consulting, one arm of consulting, where it's like you're managing, expenses, sure, profit and loss, costs and revenue, but you're also managing human capital. In other words, it's a fancy way of saying, if you have X number of resources, in this case humans, right, so employee management, that's basically what you're doing. So if a project needs, example, 500 employees for some reason, right, maybe a mix of 400 contractors, 100 full-time employees for an initiative that may last 7 years, 10 years. I'm totally making this scenario up, right? But there's scenarios like this where, okay, the job of someone to plan and do this is, that person, like a human capital strategist or consultant. And then from there, this is basically the plan of action or what needs to happen. Or, hey, there's a merger acquisition, so this is what's going to happen in terms of organizational change management, which is a fancy way of saying hiring and firing people and then training them on new processes, but understanding what the current processes are in today's landscape. So, if you have nothing else going for you, that's up to you. If you want to chill, play video games, do a whole lot of nothing, right? That's okay. But just own it, because after 5 years, after 10 years, look out 15, 20 years from now. Can you do the same things today that give you happiness without really changing anything in your day-to-day? If you can do that, forget about slave, forget about anything. A lot of people just call that happiness, because you're already where you are. You're already where you want to be. What are you doing what you're doing for? So if you take away the label of slave and how we're looking at it negatively, you may have everything you want. But when you start comparing, as a slave basically, what you have, right? This is your keep. This is what you got. You collected this many of whatever to get your wage, right? If that's the metric of, hey, I'm trading my hours end up in this much of output, deliverable, whatever it is that's coming out, that's basically the cost, or in other words, the money that you're going to earn. Like, if you're proud of that and you're doing it day in, day out, great. But when it comes down to in the end of the day at your deathbed, right? What do you want to be either remembered for, or what do you say success is to yourself? And as long as you know that, whatever you're doing, you can keep doing it. But chances are, if you're watching this video and you know this kind of feeling of like, man, like this guy next to me says he makes this much more per hour or more per year, and they think they're the number one, they think they're the shit, and they're like better than you, then that's a choice to feel that energy, to accept it, or say, hey, buddy, there's people that are competitive about that, right? Then they're also like, I'm going to earn this much more this year to beat that guy Rob over there diagonal from me who sits here in that cubicle. Like, that's cool. It's the game you want to play. But understand that if you are comparing yourself purely, sheerly on numbers, there is literally, in my life that I've seen such far, right, thus far, that you're just a number. You're just a guy who's like, oh, cool, like you earned this much. So what else? Like, who are you? If I want to do business with you, apart from giving you a job for a contract to do certain tasks, which you may be great at, but if I don't care about that, would we have a beer? Would we go for a round of golf? Would we, catch up for chai or coffee, right? Like, would we ever share a meal? Would we ever do anything apart from you doing your job and you knowing you're amazing and all these things? What is a value that you can provide to others? Because the slave provides what the contract says. But a real human, right, maybe the one that hires the next person, right, who delegates their work, but has a reason of doing this and the why. And that person who's working that, job or whatever, may not feel that it's just a job. Maybe there is a mission, there's a mission statement and all these fancy business terms. But if you care about the mission, then there is some validity. If you don't care and you just want a paycheck, just know what game you're entering into. Which is why years and years later, right, so this video is sponsored by me, this ending segment, is basically me saying, hey, I've been a worker bee. I've busted my ass for a fixed salary, not knowing the repercussions or how, even commission jobs work. If you're willing to put in the effort, how much more you can make. A lot of things that I didn't know. So this channel is basically me sharing my lessons and thoughts of, okay, these are the next things that may happen in the next 5-10 years out, but also lessons that I've learned along the way. Because apart from YouTube or other just social media kind of, good influences that have been there, it's obviously a lot of nonsense, I wouldn't be where I am today. So with all that said, if you're interested as an investor who is, what I identify myself as after everything, not just someone who's working a job or items like this, right? But in the end, that output, it comes back to money, right? And so if the slave measures their value by, okay, this is how much I have, this is how much I'm making, it's like, but bro, how much do you really have in terms of freedom, right? So when you look at freedom, how do you get there? Okay, there's financial freedom. There's obviously, less stress, just mental clarity. And all of these things, when you think about happiness, there's 3 things: health, wealth, relationships. I always say it, right? And with those things, relationships, if you're an asshole, nobody wants to deal with you. That, you can change yourself, right? And you don't need to be accepted by everyone, but that's a choice. But how do you unlock relationships? Chances are, if you're overweight, obese, all these things, or, you look a certain way, but you don't look well-groomed, well-kept, you may be a good-looking person, but you're not maintaining yourself in society. We say, hey, you're not really healthy, right? For whatever reason, whether mental health or physical health or what have us. So then what is the other part? Okay, wealth. Funny thing about wealth is that when you have wealth, right, a certain level of wealth, I'm not talking like, just enough to go, not work for an extra 2 weeks or something because you got, some money in your checking account, and that's not even a good way to manage finances, but not the point of this video. Where when you have wealth, you can unlock, relationships. You can take better care of your health. Why? Because now you don't have maybe the same stressors, maybe the same kind of schedule, whatever that regimen, forced regimen, waking up at a certain time, having X number of coffees a day, all those things. So simply put, imagine having the opportunity to actually own an asset where you have appreciation, just like real estate, just like all these homes we're seeing, right? But these are single family, basically homes and townhomes in this specific case. Point being that you can be the owner, right, of a commercial property, which it's a 250 room hotel. We're going for 5-star status. You basically would own the actual property, whether it's a 1 bedroom, a 2 bedroom, or even, there's a profit sharing model if you don't want to own a certain SKU, like a certain unit type, but you want to say, hey, I want to be a part of the profits, right? The beauty here is in all three cases, you can basically invest and you own essentially that property in your name. So the land slash, that property is yours. That means you have appreciation because there's land, it's construction wise, it's already started, right? We're looking around 2 to 3 years out in terms of completion. But you own the land, and so there's appreciation through development of that land. That's part one. Then it's a commercial property, so that's even more appreciation, right? And then if I wanted to invest into a Marriott, IHG, Hilton, Marriott, all these type of properties, right? Is it possible today? Anything is possible, but do I know that network of people? Can I just go online and buy something on Amazon equivalent or like a Robinhood on the stock market, like a share of something? I can buy Marriott shares, but it's not like I can own the actual property and control the cash flows that come from there, right? Because I'm actually an owner, you're a part owner. So you would own land slash property, so you can also stay there if you'd like, right? If it's not rented out, slash, you can choose like, hey, let me not get paid for some time if you actually want to be there. Like, that's totally up to you. So the second part of this is even before construction's finished, how would you get rental income or passive income or all these like terms, right? It really is passive because once you put your money in, you're kind of just reaping the rewards. The difference is I can go to the bank, I can borrow. But the point, instead of just the same topic of this video, right, is Slave quantifies their value through what they're producing. Here I'm saying, hey, I've seen a lot of investments. I've been a part of a lot of investments, whether you call it the stock market, cryptocurrency market, real estate, all these different, industries slash, asset classes, if you want to put it like that. And in the end, right, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I was alone until I wasn't. And I see the power of being associated with people that are having that similar mindset, saying, hey, I may not have money today, but tomorrow there is something. Or, hey, I have money today and I want to do something about it. Or, hey, Lalit, I have a big project that I'm working on and I want you to, either opine about it, invest into it, what have us. It's all about sharing those opportunities because in the end, there's all the other memes and funny content online and then there's everything else, right? So irrespective of the feeling of, the system and money and, why are you earning it? It's like there's also a way out of the system because the system is made in such a way that people who want to produce get out, capitalism, and the people that don't, that's, the complainers and where things kind of unfortunately stay. So there's a link in the description below. Check it out. Happy to talk with us one-on-one. Investments are around from 15K USD to 3 million USD. I say USD depending where you're watching from. But with all that said, I appreciate you coming this far. Like, share, subscribe, all the things. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace for now.